Okay, let's talk about 12 Monkeys, shall we? Because I actually found myself recommending this show the other day to someone, and while talking about the time travel and the causal loops and how cleverly written this show actually is, I kind of thought this would work really well for a YouTube video. And I thought I should probably write down my thoughts into a more coherent analysis. So here we are. Because 12 Monkeys is one of the smartest and most satisfying time travel shows ever made. And there's a good chance you either missed it completely or confused it with the Bruce Willis film sporting the same name. Now, across 4 seasons, it told a complete, intricately constructed story, yet somehow remains one of the most overlooked sci-fi series of the past decade. So let's explore why it's so good, how its time travel is so clever, and why the characters are so endearing all these years later. Welcome to 12 Monkeys. Now, the word underrated is thrown around a lot in the entertainment industry, and usually it's not actually justified for half the shows. But when it comes to 12 Monkeys, that description definitely feels justified. Now, the series first aired in 2015, right in the middle of one of the strongest periods modern television has ever experienced. Honestly, just going down the list, it's insane how many heavy hitters we had. We had Daredevil, the good show, not the remake of Born Again on Disney, Making a Murderer, The Expanse, Mr. Robot, Better Call Saul, Humans, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and Game of Thrones, to name but a few. Now, all of these were competing for attention alongside countless other critically acclaimed shows. I mean, good grief, what a year we had. Now, against that competition, a sci-fi adaptation of a 20-year-old film was always going to struggle. Now, it didn't help that 12 Monkeys was initially marketed as a serialised reworking of the 1995 movie. Now, that film brought Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt together for a tightly wound story that wrapped everything up with a neat little bow after 2 hours. So how on earth were they going to stretch that concept out to 13 40-minute episodes? It really did feel like a recipe for disaster. Instead, creators Terry Matalas and Travis Fickett used the film as a starting point before transforming 12 Monkeys into something far more ambitious and impressive. Now, what begins as a simple story about stopping a deadly virus eventually evolves into an enormous, carefully constructed puzzle spanning centuries. Now, underneath all the paradoxes and causal loops though, 12 Monkeys never forgets that it's the characters that matter, which is part of the reason this story has remained so fondly regarded by fans of this show. Now, the first season follows the basic premise established by the film. In the future of 2043, the world has been devastated by a virus that wiped out most of humanity. And those who remain have either formed small settlements or become scavengers, known rather imaginatively as scavs, doing whatever they can to survive. At the centre of the attempts to fix this is Katarina Jones, a brilliant scientist whose work is driven partly by her grief over the death of her daughter. Now, her solution is something called Project Splinter. Rather than curing the virus in the present, Jones intends to prevent the outbreak entirely from ever happening by sending a low-life scavenger named James Cole backwards through time. Cole's destination is the year 2013, where a scrambled recording from virologist Dr. Cassandra Rayleigh appears to identify a man named Leland Frost as the origin of the plague. And the mission sounds pretty straightforward: find Frost, stop the virus, and save the future. Naturally, things are not that simple. Cole quickly finds himself caught in a conspiracy involving the mysterious army of the 12 Monkeys, a group seemingly working against his attempts to alter history. Looming over everything are whispers about an enigmatic figure known only as the Witness. On the surface, the first season offers a relatively conventional version of time travel. Cole jumps backwards and forwards, actions in the past reshape the future, and characters gradually learn that changing history has serious consequences. There are paradoxes, loops, and plenty of warnings about causality, but the central objective remains easy to understand. They basically need to stop the plague, save humanity, and try not to accidentally erase anyone important from existence along the way. The show's opening season is fun. It's probably around a 7 out of 10 if I'm honest, working to teach us the rules of its world, and settle into something recognisable for movie lovers without ruffling any feathers. And we believe we understand what's happening and settle into a consistent groove, and then the writers begin pulling the rug out from underneath us. And from season 2 onwards, we soon come to realise we never really understood that world as well as we thought. Our time travel stories can usually be divided into a few broad categories, but for the sake of 12 Monkeys, it never treats time travel as a convenient shortcut because every journey has consequences. An action taken in one period may completely transform another. A seemingly insignificant conversation can actually become vitally important several episodes, or even seasons, later. Our characters encounter people who remember events they haven't experienced yet, which pays off further down the line. Information moves through time in circles, sometimes making it difficult to determine where that idea originally came from. It's not quite as head-scratchingly convoluted as something like Dark, where you need a flipboard and whiteboard to try and work out exactly how all the characters slot together, but there's enough here in 12 Monkeys to keep you guessing all the same. Because yes, 12 Monkeys does occasionally ask viewers to accept some very strange or silly ideas, but the internal logic within the show remains impressively consistent across its 4 seasons. There's enough scientific terminology to give this Project Splinter some credibility, not to mention Katarina constantly screaming, "Initiate Splinter sequence." But the characters are not constantly standing around whiteboards discussing quantum mechanics, or doing what Stranger Things does, where they use 80s toys to explain other theories. The mythology does become increasingly complicated, but the central drama circles around one very simple but effective question. What are you willing to sacrifice to create a better future? Now, most time travel stories do eventually confront the question of whether history can truly be changed or not, and 12 Monkeys returns to that idea repeatedly, especially during its 3rd season. Now, I won't get into the logistics of the plot here at all because spoilers, but they do repeatedly cross moral and ethical boundaries in the belief that they are creating a better future. This gives the show a really interesting tension between fate, free will, and the illusion of control. Because are you really in control? Or is there someone else pulling the strings, driving you along into thinking you have free will? Now, interestingly, most of the central characters here are also driven by some form of grief. They're trying to undo a loss, prevent one from happening maybe, or create a world where someone they love can survive. Sure, Project Splinter is a scientific mission designed to save humanity, but it's also born out of grief, desperation, and a very human refusal to accept loss. And this is where 12 Monkeys becomes more than an elaborate timeline puzzle. Its characters are not simply trying to rewrite history, they're also trying to bargain with grief. Now, as the mythology expands, 12 Monkeys keeps its focus grounded on its characters, because they remain the heart of the series. And every major player changes significantly across the 4 seasons, and their development is often shaped by different experiences of time travel or what they witness. You see, James Cole initially looks like the standard grizzled hero sent to save the world. He's tough and accustomed to violence, but he's not a straightforwardly heroic figure either. Cole very much has blood on his hands long before Project Splinter begins, having survived in the future by doing some pretty questionable things. Travelling back in time doesn't suddenly transform him into an holier-than-thou character, but he does learn how to harness that raw emotion he carries. Cole largely works as the show's emotional anchor, and he's largely everyone's favourite character too, because his basic motivation remains understandable even as the plot becomes increasingly wild. His confliction stems from whether the world is worth saving if everyone he cares about must be sacrificed to achieve that. That sets up this lovely friction that's explored in a good amount of detail across the season. Now, Cassandra Rayleigh undergoes an equally important transformation too, because Cassie begins as this brilliant virologist who believes in saving lives no matter what. She initially recoils from the brutality Cole brings with him from the future, but the more exposure she gets to his harsh world in the future, the more this apocalypse starts to harden and change her. Cassie doesn't suddenly become an unstoppable action hero or an insufferable Mary Sue, but the more she suffers, the more she adapts, eventually able to make some very difficult decisions. Now, at various points, Cole and Cassie almost move in opposite directions, and the man from the apocalypse begins rediscovering his humanity, while the compassionate virologist becomes hardened by the knowledge of what's coming. Now, it wouldn't be a conflict without one loose cannon, and that comes from Cole's best friend Ramsey. Ramsey is abrasive, hard-headed, and not exactly the easiest character to support. His attitude is pretty unpleasant. I mean, he's a reflection of the harsh, brutal world he's grown up with, but he's also the extreme version of what Cole could have been had he stayed in the future. He also works as a moral voice in Cole's ear too, for better or worse. Now, I mentioned her before, but Katarina Jones follows a similarly complicated path. She's the architect of Project Splinter, like I said, and initially appears to be the rational scientist guiding everyone, yet her work is pretty much inseparable from her grief. That makes her both a sympathetic and dangerously unpredictable character, capable of causing as much harm as she does good. Now, when Deacon first appears, it's difficult not to look at him and think we've got a discount Negan from The Walking Dead on our hands.
And it appears we have a couple of openings.
Really?
He's introduced as this brutal leader of the West 7, complete with a theatrical presence and a sort of behaviour that screams, I'm a disposable bad guy. And yet Deacon eventually becomes one of the show's most layered characters. His journey is somewhat reminiscent of Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and to a lesser extent I guess Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z, because he begins as this entertaining threat before moving firmly into anti-hero territory. And we learn more about his past, his loyalties, and the experiences that shaped him across the show, including how his initial persona is actually far more layered than we initially thought. In essence, he is the very character embodiment of 12 Monkeys itself. A simple idea that feels overplayed, but is strangely far deeper and more complex than we initially thought. Of all the show's characters though, we'd be remiss not to include Jennifer Goines, as she's the one who best represents his relationship with time. But during the first season, Jennifer can occasionally feel like she's acting strangely, simply because the script needed someone to deliver cryptic clues. Ooh, Jennifer is laughing maniacally again. Yes, we get it, show, she's crazy. I mean, she jumps between ideas, speaks in riddles, and seems to understand things she should have no possible way of knowing. And at times you may wonder whether she's actually genuinely important or just a red herring. However, as the series progresses, those concerns gradually disappear and she becomes a very intriguing character. Jennifer is intricately connected to the show's mythology too, but her apparent madness is not random. Questions introduced early in the show begin to take on greater significance once you understand how the puzzle pieces slot together. What's a primary? Why is the colour red so important? Why does Jennifer seem to recognise people and events before encountering them? The answers recontextualise much of her earlier behaviour, and Emily Hampshire deserves enormous credit here too. She is frequently the most entertaining character in the show, blending a funny, chaotic, wounded and strangely perceptive persona together. By the final seasons, 12 Monkeys has moved so far beyond trying to stop a virus that explaining the plot to an unsuspecting friend may make you sound a little like Jennifer during one of her less coherent afternoons. Somehow though, it all fits together in a really satisfying manner. Now, much like Netflix's Dark, 12 Monkeys has an enormous amount of detail hidden beneath the surface. It is worth remembering though that 12 Monkeys began several years before Dark became widely regarded as a modern benchmark for intricately plotted time travel TV. The two shows also have very different personalities too. Where Dark is somber and intensely serious, 12 Monkeys is far more adventurous and romantic, with a willingness to embrace humour and occasional absurdity. Honestly, the show somehow manages to do a rendition of 99 Red Balloons and turns it into this trippy music video in a pretty impressive sequence. The lighter moments don't weaken the darker material though, as they instead give the tragic moments far more impact. In fact, the most impressive similarity between 12 Monkeys and Dark is the rewatch value. Lines that initially sound like nonsense become warnings on repeat watches. A seemingly innocuous charcoal scribble, a line of 3 crayons, a mention of words related to the mythology of the world, it's all here hiding in plain sight, and it's an absolute joy to see. Now, one of the rarest accomplishments in television is a show that genuinely improves with each season. Plenty of series begin strongly before running out of ideas, stretching their mysteries too far, or simply collapsing beneath the weight of audience expectations. 12 Monkeys though, bizarrely moves in the opposite direction. The first season largely works to establish the foundation, before the second builds on that with extra time periods and concepts. From the third season onwards, the show really begins showing off. There are more elaborate locations, sharper editing, and a glossy polished quality that its opening episodes could not always achieve. I'm being deliberately careful with spoilers here guys, don't worry, but the identity of that threat at the centre of everything, the significance of repeated symbols, and the show's wider mythology are all developed with a very clear sense of purpose. By the time the final season arrives, you feel confident that the writers know exactly where all of this is heading. Now, as anyone will tell you, a TV show can live or die by its ending. You can create unforgettable characters and dominate the cultural conversation for years, but if you get your finale wrong, that disappointment will overshadow everything that came before it. And yes, Game of Thrones and Stranger Things, we are looking directly at both of you. Now, 12 Monkeys doesn't have that same problem. Its final run of episodes are actually among the strongest in the entire series, with the conclusion providing both a satisfying resolution to the puzzle and a very satisfying emotional payoff for the characters. The final episodes resolve the threat, explain the causal structure behind much of the series, and bring the central character arcs to meaningful conclusions. In fact, the show's greatest trick is making its ending feel simultaneously surprising and inevitable, because once those final pieces fall into place, you start to realise the show could never have ended any other way. Now, beyond its central story, 12 Monkeys also contains some wonderfully strange Easter eggs. Fans of Impractical Jokers may actually recognise all 4 members of the group appearing in cameos across the series. Their roles vary considerably, but their mix of humour and dramatic delivery actually fits the show surprisingly well. The cameos also reflect the series' willingness to have fun with itself, adding just the right touch of levity to the fold. That tonal range allows it to include musical performances, like I said, little bits of comedy and bizarre historical detours without breaking the atmosphere. The show knows when to embrace absurdity and when to pull everything back for an emotional moment too, being careful not to confuse the two states. This extends out to the soundtrack as well, with an excellent main intro and score, along with some hauntingly appropriate covers of tracks like Don't You Forget About Me. Now, for a show that began in the shadow of a famous film sporting the same name, and arriving during an overwhelmingly competitive period for television, 12 Monkeys is the one that's arguably survived relatively unscathed. It would have been easy for the show to disappear after 1 or 2 seasons, remembered only as another unnecessary remake produced during Hollywood's obsession with mining familiar IP. Instead, 12 Monkeys takes that foundation established by the film and expands it out into one of the smartest, most ambitious, and most satisfying time travel stories on television. So if you're stuck for something to watch, or have somehow never encountered this strange little sci-fi gem, 12 Monkeys is absolutely worth your time. This is a smart, funny, and wildly ambitious series, complete with one of the best endings in modern sci-fi television. Perhaps the most frustrating thing about 12 Monkeys is that more people are not talking about it. Then again, maybe its time simply has not arrived just yet. Thanks for watching, guys, and be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I actually had a lot of fun diving back into 12 Monkeys, watching the episodes and crafting this essay, and it's something I've wanted to do quite a lot with on this channel, just to kind of break down and dive into different TV shows through history, including some of the best and worst, and why they work and why they completely fall apart. You enjoyed watching this one? By all means, drop us a comment or a like, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like more essays like this. Your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.